In this video, I am exposing 7 of the biggest mistakes nonprofit founders make in the beginning. These literally waste hours of time and thousands of dollars, and these are very preventable mistakes. So what I'm going to do in this video is walk through what those are, but also give you suggestions for how to approach them in a different way. Keep watching because number 4 is the mistake that most people make. I would say like 90% of people make this mistake, and I want to help you avoid it. If you don't know me, I'm Tiffany with Boss on a Budget. I teach people how to start nonprofits and how to raise money from the ground up. If you need help for your nonprofit, make sure you're subscribed to this channel because I drop videos every week. Here's the first mistake. Most people don't realize that your nonprofit is still a business. Some of you watching are like, it's not a business, Tiffany, it's a charity. Why would I go into this thinking it's a business? But what you have to realize is in most circumstances, y'all are creating corporations. A corporation is a business. And essentially the same processes that you would go through to start a for-profit and ensure a for-profit is successful pretty much is the same as what you would do for your nonprofit. But too many times people approach it like, oh, this is a pet project of mine, or we're just a group of volunteers, or we just want to help. If you just want to help, then my recommendation is not to start a business because that's what you're doing when you start a nonprofit. If you just want to help, then you can do that without having any kind of formal entity, any kind of formal group set up. Once you mosey on over to the IRS website, you are now official and you have to act like it. I'm not trying to be harsh. I'm actually trying to be real because on this channel, I want to see you succeed. I want to see you win. And the quicker and the sooner you learn these lessons, the quicker and sooner you'll meet your goals and you'll be successful. So here's just what you need to know. You still got to do market research. You still have to figure out what other people are doing in your area and what are the things that are missing? What are the gaps in services? Who's not being served? Who's being ignored? Can you target those areas or provide programs in those gaps so that you're not just duplicating services, but you're also contributing to the network of services that already exist in your local area? Are you creating short-term and long-term goals for your organization? Are you planning from year to year? Are you strategically thinking about how you want to move based on what's happening in the environment around you? Are you doing financial projections? Are you creating a budget, right? Are you thinking about the financial future of your organization? Are you thinking about what happens when you no longer are with your organization? If you're creating a nonprofit, then you more than likely want that nonprofit to be around for a long time. You're not always going to be on the board of your nonprofit. You're not always going to work for your nonprofit. So the things that you do in the early stages sets the tone for how successful you will be for years to come. And so we're going to talk about a couple more things around planning for your nonprofit in the other areas. But the whole point is that you have to approach this like a business. This is not a pet project. Once you cross that line and you get 501c3 status, it's a new ball game. It's just different. So make sure you approach your nonprofit for what it really is, a nonprofit business. Here's the second mistake I see. When people do everything themselves and they're not prepared to delegate. Now, some of this is intentional and some of this you cannot help. So I'm going to be real. For a lot of people starting their nonprofits, they try to get people to help, but people just aren't consistent and they fall off. So that is a reality that I just want to acknowledge. But I do want to say that if you're starting a nonprofit, I highly recommend you don't start it by yourself. First of all, you got to have a board. You need to have at least 3 people on the board when you approach the IRS, right? So make sure you really do that intentionally. Find at least 3 people, even beyond yourself, who will agree to meet and plan with you and help you think through your mission and help think through how you want to grow the organization. I also want you to get in the mindset that you will not forever be in a position where everything is unpaid. A lot of times nonprofit founders will set up everything that revolves around them. So nothing can happen unless they're involved. Well, if you eventually want volunteers or hopefully paid staff to do some of the work, then you have to be able to organize and design the work to be done by other people. So you need to be thinking about how can I set stuff up where somebody else knows this information and somebody else can step in and do it. There are a couple ways that you can do this. First of all, make sure that any plans or any ways you move forward is discussed in the context of the board, because in most circumstances, you have a working board. So you all are not just planning and strategizing, you're also doing the work. So the board needs to be fully bought into what's happening, fully understand all the pieces of the work that's happening. Now, usually a normal board wouldn't be all in the weeds, but in the beginning, that's just what it is, right? So that means that other people know how to access certain software, right? You just need to make sure that you're not the only holder of information. Also, you need to set up a structure where there are different committees doing different things, where you're dividing up the work, say marketing or fundraising or financial management. You're dividing it up, but you're dividing it up for other people to take on that work outside of the board meetings. And also, you need to set it up in your meetings so that other people are responsible for gathering information and presenting to everyone else. And you need to make sure that it's not just centered all around you or what you do as the founder. And I highly recommend when you're doing your work to create what's called standard operating procedures or SOPs, where you're documenting how to do a process so that if somebody needs to come after you and do it, it's already documented and they can do it in the same way, in the same process, with instruction and with training, but there's some kind of system to track how you do your work. Number 3 is about compliance. And I started out this video saying state compliance, but I also want to add at the end of this a note about compliance with the IRS. So you need to make sure you know the rules of your state and you know what they expect of you. Most states have either an annual process where you're submitting an annual report, not every state, but a lot of states require you to submit information every year just to check in to see, hey, are you still alive? Are you still working? Where a lot of people get hemmed up around state compliance is charitable solicitation. So if your state has a requirement to register your charity or to register your organization, if you're going to ask for donations or try to get grants from an organization in that state, then you should be applying to do that. That's usually called charitable registration or charitable solicitation. And most states who have that kind of requirement want you to apply before you start asking for money. So if you have a donate button on your website, that's considered solicitation for many states. And if you are advertising to donors that live in a state and there's a requirement there, they want to know who you are and they want you to register and most times pay a fee. And you probably have to submit an annual report just for that process alone where you're sharing your financials and you have to pay a regular fee. So you need to get up to speed when it comes to charitable solicitation. It's messy. I'm just going to be honest. And if you have donors from certain states, you need to research those states and see what their processes are, because there are fines associated with you fundraising and you not going through the right process. So I have absolutely heard about nonprofits who've been fined lots of money because they didn't go through the process first. There may be other things like business licenses if you do certain kinds of work. It kind of speaks more to the programming that you have. There may be a license that you need to do that kind of work. And there may be other requirements for your state that you just need to be aware of. Get to know the people at the state offices so that you don't get in trouble. But another piece I just want to add related to the IRS, make sure you do your 990 form. A lot of people make this mistake. And you want to know how you know you made this mistake? When you get a letter from the IRS and they say, oh, we have revoked your tax exempt status. You do not want that. If you do not fill out a 990 form every year, the IRS will automatically take away your 501c3 status. And a lot of people kind of go dormant, right? They say, well, for a couple of years, I just wasn't working on my nonprofit, but I'm going to come back to it. So you may not be making any money. You may not be doing any activity. If you still want that organization to be around, you have to file that paperwork, even if you haven't made one dime, right? Because if you don't submit those forms, they're going to take away your status. So there are 3 different versions of that form. There's the 990N, sometimes referred to as the postcard. There's the 990EZ and the 990, which is the original form. So just make sure you're aware of those and make sure you submit them every year. You hear me? How often are you supposed to submit them? Every year. Drop that in the comments so I make sure you got it, okay? Number 4 is a big one. So we're talking about costly mistakes that nonprofit founders typically make. And this is one of the most costly. It's focusing too much on events. I have talked about this in other videos, but let me just say that when you're doing fundraising events, they're typically a lot of money. So I'm talking about galas or prayer breakfast or, like a sneaker ball, those kind of events where, you're going to have an MC, you're going to have music, you're going to have food, you may even have drinks, the whole 9. The idea of it sounds great because you're bringing people together to have such a good time. A lot of people get caught up because they see other nonprofits doing it a lot. You hear all the time about galas and stuff like that. Here's the thing they do not tell you. These events cost money and that they are not making a lot of money from them. They're spending way more than they need to. And even if they're raising a lot of money, a lot of that money may be going towards the cost of the event. And a lot of nonprofits will do this. They'll get stuck in this cycle and keep doing it over and over again without realizing it's a money suck. So don't focus too much on events in the beginning if you know that the effort to put up, including time time and also money is not worth it, right? Events are great because it's a way to meet people face to face. It's a way to get to know people. You can follow up with them. You can build your contact list. And that way they're really great. But the downside is if you're doing an event and you're new, I guarantee as a founder, you're doing a lot of the planning. You're doing all the running around. So you don't even have time to meet people during the event. You don't even have time to introduce yourself and talk about your mission because you're getting pulled every which way. Why? Because you're new and you don't have a lot of capacity yet. You don't have a lot of people helping you yet. So again, don't focus so heavily on them if the return is not worth it. If you want to raise money in the beginning, an event is not the way to go. This is what you do. You get a list of people who you're attached to personally, professionally, socially, and you develop a strong message. You ask yourself, how much money do we need to raise to move forward in a certain way? Maybe there's something you want to accomplish or a number of people you want to reach or serve. You create an ask around that and say, we need to raise $5,000 in order to do this for these people. You reach out to the group of people who you're connected to and you ask them to donate a set amount of money that helps you get to that $5,000 or whatever the goal is. And you follow up and you follow up again. That is the easiest, the quickest, and the cheapest way to raise money in the beginning. If you need a more detailed plan for how to do this, I created a step-by-step workbook to help you raise your first $10,000. So if you want to purchase that, just comment $10,000 below and I will send you a link to that workbook. Number 5 is not tracking your data. Here's the thing you got to realize. Fundraising is not about saying, hey, I need to raise money. Can you give me money? And then people just give it to you. Fundraising, a lot of it is you sharing the impact of your work with people who care about your mission or they care about what you're doing, and you showing them the impact and them saying, I want to invest in that, or I want to give to make that possible. So a lot of how you convince people, especially on an ongoing basis, to support you financially is to show them that you're doing something worthwhile. And one of the best ways to do that is to gather data, right? And when I say data, I don't want to get too technical, but there are two main types of data: quantitative, which is numbers, and qualitative, which is more narrative-based data, stories, right? You need to be gathering both. From the very beginning, you should be tracking numbers about the people you serve. You need to track how many people you serve or how many activities you carry out. You need to track demographic data about who you serve. You need to think about race, ethnicity, gender, any other important characteristics about them that are relevant to the work that you do. You need to think about tracking their progress on whatever you want to measure or whatever you want to change. How were they when they first met you? When they received your services? What changed? What shifted? You need to be collecting numbers, quantitative data about that. But you also need to collect stories. Talk about what happened to people. What was life like for them when they first got to your organization? What happened and what changed for them after? Collect those stories, collect those quotes. They are so powerful. Make it a part of your regular process in your meetings to talk about your stories, to show data. Put a process in place where you produce a report, even if nobody asks you for it. Produce a data report on the work that you do and just do it every year and pass it out. People want to see the impact of your work. Incorporate that into your fundraising emails, into your asks, and watch the money come in. Number 6 is ignoring your infrastructure and only focusing on programming. Let me break this one down a little bit. A lot of people get really excited about having a nonprofit because it's your opportunity to help change somebody's life or just to help somebody. And I know at the core of what you're doing, that's what it's all about, right? You just want to help somebody. But then when you start a nonprofit, you realize that it's all this other stuff. It's all this administrative stuff that you have to work on and you have to focus on. And because it may be overwhelming or because you just don't understand it, you may ignore some key pieces around your infrastructure because you're trying to focus on your programming. You can't afford to ignore one, right? You can't ignore one at the expense of the other. You got to be thinking about your programming as well as your administration or your infrastructure. So you need to think about building a strong board. That is one of the key indicators that you're going to be successful, how strong and engaged and committed your board is. So you have to work on recruiting the right people, vetting them, getting them involved, making sure they're engaged, making sure they participate. That takes a lot of work, but you got to invest in that. Make sure you have policies in place. You have policies around your conflict of interest. You have your whistleblower policy. You have an executive compensation policy. You have the SOPs that I talked about earlier in this video. Have you written down your processes for how you do things, not just for in programming, but also for your accounting or for when you're hiring staff? Are you investing in technology technology to help make you more efficient. Instead of just using PayPal, are you investing in a donation platform that really does elevate your fundraising asks? Instead of just sending people email newsletters through Gmail, are you investing in an email marketing system that can help track information and track who opens your emails and who clicks? All that kind of stuff really does make you more successful. And here's the last thing I'm going to say about admin before I move on to the last point. Are you building a budget that also supports the administrative piece of your organization? Are you actually putting information in your budget to help build your infrastructure? You're not just raising money just to go to programming. And for some people, this may be controversial because every dollar raised has to go to programming. And I push back on that because if you talk to any nonprofit professional, they're going to tell you the same thing. You have to invest in your infrastructure. You got to make sure that there are admin dollars. How are you paying for technology? How are you paying for an accountant? How are you paying for the assistance of a lawyer? How are you paying for marketing staff? How are you paying for people to help fundraise for you? That's administrative type costs. And the fundraising and marketing costs have a separate category of costs, but it's still the same point. You are building the structure of your organization. You're trying to make it stronger, not just by investing in your programming, but investing in the things, the structure, the people who support the programming. And if you don't do that, then you're not going to be sustainable. So make sure you're paying attention to the administrative pieces of your organization and not just programming. And then finally, the last mistake I'll talk about is no marketing. I'm going to keep this short and simple. If people don't know who you are or they don't know you exist, then they cannot support you. I could just end the video there, right? But I'm trying to be funny, but it's true. If people don't know about you, how can they even give you a dime? So you have to invest in marketing strategies. You have to think about your marketing strategies. If people don't know you exist, how can they use your programs? How can they use your services, right? So do you have a website in place? Do you have a strategy where you're going out in your local community and you're attending networking events and you're joining boards and committees to represent your organization? Do you have a presence online? Do you have a social media platform where you're regularly talking about and engaging with people on that platform? Are you reaching out to potential funders and meeting them? Are you talking to the media and talking about your work and trying to get into the local newspaper or trying to get on a local news station? Are you going on podcasts and being interviewed about your work? I'm just telling you that it may feel really scary as a nonprofit founder at the thought that you have to do that and be so visible, but it's so necessary. So make sure you have some kind of marketing plan or strategy in place that includes regular activities for you to introduce people to the work that you do, introduce people to your organization, and then keep them abreast of what you're doing. You should have an email newsletter. You should be checking in with people through text if you can. You should be following up with your donors. You should be sharing information with your funders and your sponsors about the good work that you're doing. It's all a cycle. You have to constantly communicate to introduce yourself to people, but also keep reintroducing yourself to people. Make sense? I hope it does. If you have questions, drop them in the comments. We've talked about 7 mistakes that can cost you time and honestly money. If you need help with your nonprofit, visit me at bossonabudget.com. I have plenty of resources there to help you. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.